Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Monday. Hope everybody's having a good day. Hope you're having a good start to the month of June. Busy month, graduation month. Hope everybody had a great weekend. I want to talk today about something a little different. It's an article that I came across that actually brought to my attention that Denmark is doing some things. We sometimes hear the old saying, something stinks in Denmark, but no, it's not the case in this particular situation. Apparently, they've got some different things going on over there in their mortgage market that would, to be honest, be very beneficial to the U.S. market. Denmark and America and the U.S. are very similar in how their 30-year mortgages work and so forth. So, but what's interesting is that their system prevents the lock-in effect, where homeowners are not selling because of the fact that they don't want to lose their rate. So I wanted to just talk about it. You know, is it a probability? Maybe not. Is it a possibility? Yes. And it's just very interesting. So I'm gonna dive into it. But first, I wanted to bring a friend of mine into the fold so we can get him his viewpoint on things, and coming all the way from he just told me where he was from, Southern California, I think it was. He's from California. This is, my short-term memory. It's tough getting old. So in any event, come on, Joe. How you doing there?
Hey, Jen, I'm good. How are you today?
So is it in Southern? Did you say Southern California? You said Southern, right?
California, yeah. So I'm in Claremont, California. It's a suburb of Los Angeles. I'm about 35 or 40 miles dead east of downtown LA.
Okay. Well, so hey, I had the right state at least, right?
Like, yeah, that's, you hit that. Yeah, you were correct on that.
Put a pin in it, and at least we get the right location. So this article was super interesting, right? I sent it to you. Yeah. And this is the first time I've heard of this. And I did some research on it, the last, few days, and found a couple, not a ton, but found a couple articles about it. And you could tinfoil hat that and say, well, the reason why I didn't find a lot of articles is because the media is being told what to report, and there's a lot of reasons for that, which we're going to dig into, and why it's improbable that the U.S. would actually make this happen. It would be great if we could follow Denmark's lead, but it's quite interesting, right? Like, I mean. So, you saw it. We're going to get into it in a second, but have you heard of this? Did you see this article or anything about it before now? Or
I was not aware. First and foremost, for the people out there, the way that America does mortgages is pretty different than a very large majority of the rest of the world. So
the entire world.
Yeah, so it's pretty. It's interesting to learn that not only did Denmark adopt a very similar mortgage and loan setup as we did here in the United States, but their one spin on it, which is kind of going to be I think the bulk of what we talk about today, is very interesting. I was not aware of it, but I think it's a great idea to kind of wrap up some of these mortgages into more of a sort of a sellable asset, if you will, that the owners can leverage. And
right.
It like you said, it reduces that lock-in effect, which is what we're feeling so heavy right now in the United States.
100%. Well, you know what? Let's bring it up. That's what everybody's. That's what you're logged in. People are watching this for. They want to know what the heck we're talking about. So, this article from Business Insider, reputable media provider, Denmark's genius housing fix. One simple change to mortgage rules could supercharge home buying in America. This article goes on to say, it says, the typical home loan in America is a gift, and it's also a trap. Most U.S. home loans have loans that, actually, I'm going to stop right there for a second. I'm just going to make this a little easier for those watching at home can see it. There we go. And for me, most U.S. home loans have loans that guarantee that they'll pay the same amount each month for decades, regardless of inflation or the shifting winds of economy. These are called the 30-year fixed-rate mortgages, which we're aware of. And they offer rare bright spots of certainty in the housing market's endless cycle of booms and busts. Get your 30-year locked-in mortgage, Conventional 30-year fixed, that rate is 30 years forever. 30 years for 30, locked in that rate for 30 years. Learn how to talk, Jen. Lock in a favorable rate and you're on a steady track to prosperity. But these sweetheart deals can cause big problems. When mortgage rates shoot up, as they did over the last 2 years, many would-be sellers decide they don't want to move after all. Sure, a new home would be nice, but trading up would mean parting ways with a cheap mortgage rate. What would have been a welcome change suddenly sounds like a painful, expensive divorce.
Yeah.
Ouch. So they sit tight. I've never heard it described that way, and that's very true. A gummed up housing market is good for nobody. First-time home buyers can't find enough homes to sell for sale. Wannabe sellers remain trapped in places that are either too big or too small. This is called the lock-in effect, and it could linger for decades.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we've known about the lock-in possibility for many years. John Campbell, a Harvard economist, told me, he says, but we didn't fix the roof while the sun was shining and now it's raining. Isn't that like the name of the game, Joe? You know what I'm saying? It's like turn the cheek when you have the opportunity because you're dancing in the streets and then but never prepare for that rainy day.
Yeah. And we all know that it's so much harder to be reactive than proactive, right?
Absolutely. And the reality of it is like nobody wants to be like, yes, I know that things are good, but
let's think about the bad stuff.
Let's think about the bad stuff. Of course not. And that's the way that we've been like societally, I think, whatever. That society message is like, that's what you do. You focus on the positive and just kind of, can be, as we'll see, very detrimental. Economists and housing wonks, I love that they use the word wonks, are obsessed with this uniquely American problem. One estimate suggests the lock-in effect prevented more than 1 million people from selling their homes in the span of just a year and a half, a steep toll considering about 5 million homes exchanged hands in a typical year.
So that's interesting to note because that's 1/5. Of homes that were taken off the market and held up and locked up. And, people might think, there's 350 million people in the United States and, they all got to live in homes. 1 million homes can't make that big of a difference. But when it's 20% of your entire inventory,
it's a lot.
And then people wonder, how did prices accelerate the way they did? This is a huge contributing factor, which is why the lock-in effect is so detrimental. Not just to first-time home buyers, not to home buyers in general, home sellers, everyone.
Everybody.
It's tough to everyone.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that as far as like what the ripple effects are a little bit more in deep, in a little bit. But he goes on to say, I used to think of these golden handcuffs as an inevitable side effect of the magical 30-year fixed mortgage, but it doesn't have to be this way. The answer to our problems may lie thousands of miles away in Denmark. All right, here comes the meat. Many homeowners in Denmark, like their American counterparts, enjoy a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. But thanks to a quirk of their housing finance system, Danish sellers are able to earn a profit when they trade in their low mortgage rates for a more expensive one, making it easier to move even when rates rise. As a result, the Danes dodge the lock-in effect entirely. And we're going to go into that, how that works in a bit. It says implementing a similar system in the U.S. would require an overhaul of our mortgage market and would almost surely be met with lots of foot dragging from regulators and investors, politicians, all the like. But the alternative, and this is the clincher, Joe. The alternative is twiddling our thumbs until the next housing ice age is far worse.
Yep.
Like it's like the what is the lesser of two evils? It says evils, not evil, evils. I just learned how to talk yesterday, just to make you probably figured that out by now. Maybe it's time we take a page out of our Scandinavian playbook instead. I'm just going to keep going, and then we're gonna dive in because it's going to answer a lot of questions that people are probably thinking, well, how does that work? This section is, buyers remember the pandemic era housing market for its worst qualities, bidding wars, late night, doom scrolling on Zillow, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. This is the 30-year Rate plummeted to a record low, late 2020, and existing homeowners pounced on the opportunity. As the Federal Reserve, began pushing up the borrowing rates, 2022, hoping to reel in rising inflation, mortgages went vertical. Rates doubled, so on and so forth. Rates have fallen a little since, but they're still hovering around 7%. Buyers who bought home in the early 80s may recall rates close to 18%, but for buyers and homeowners who got used to rock bottom rates in the decade after the financial crisis, the reverse was chilling. It says a recent working paper from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, estimated the lock-in prevented 1.3 million home sales between mid-22 and end of 2023. The vast majority of U.S. mortgages have fixed rates, about 96%. Okay, the agency estimated that with that 7%, these homeowners would pay roughly $500 more each month on their mortgage if they got the new rate on the same house. Okay, if you do a little convoluted math. And this is where the rubber kind of meets the road. As I put on my thumbnail, 60,000. That wasn't just a number pulled out of the air. This is where it came from. If you do a little convoluted math to figure out what all those extra payments would be worth in today's dollars, it'd be like taking $60,000, and this I'm sure is based on what the median home price is right now, and lighting it on fire. That doesn't sound like a good time, Joe.
No, it doesn't.
Lighting 60 grand on fire.
No, not enjoyable.
So it says, even if rates were to fall, this is interesting. Even if rates were to fall 6 to 5.5%, you're still going to have people who are not going to move, which is very true. Yep. Who just are not going to give up their house basically forever because they're just not going to be able to give up that rate. So it says, okay, so maybe you're not shedding any tears on behalf of these homeowners sitting on piles of equity and their sweet, sweet mortgage rates, which first-time home buyers, not like a lot of home buyers out there now are just, I think a little bit of like, a little bit of angst, a little bit of anger, a little bit of,
for sure. I feel like
frustration with homeowners because they're like, at least I have the equity, but it says, but the lock-in effect, I'm going to let you talk in a second, Joe. This is, but the lock-in effect warps the entire housing market. Fewer sellers means buyers compete for a smaller pool of available homes, driving up prices, locking in out at many first-time home and low-income buyers. It means many people who want to move to find a better job. This is important because I got another article I want to show you in a second when we get done talking about this. To find a better job, start a family, upgrade, downsize, don't have that option. A once theoretical hang-up has turned into a massive headache. This article I think hits home on many, many, many levels. So now it's like, okay, so now what do we do now? It does say, golden shackles are only a problem in America, Then there's Denmark, the only country in which similar 30-year fixed-rate mortgages are widely available. More than half of Danish borrowers have them. And just as they have in the U.S., rates for those mortgages have risen sharply. Over the course of 2022, the typical rate for 30-year mortgage in Denmark climbed by roughly 4 percentage points, the largest jump in 40 years. Here's the big catch. But Denmark's housing finance system is almost perfectly designed to shield it from the lock-in effect. And it's all because of a bit of financial magic known as covered bonds. Now, I am not, I don't know about you, Joe, but I'm going to tell you right now, if, for those watching, I am not, I never went to the School of Economics. I am not. This is a little bit outside my wheelhouse when you start getting into bonds and mortgage, backed securities and things like that. You know what I'm saying, Joe? Like this. I'm a real estate person. I'm a real estate expert. I am not a mortgage person. So this is or even economics. But I think for those watching, that are not either, this really broke it down to really basic. Yep. So here's the meat. When a bank it says here's how it works. When a bank gives a mortgage, this is what they do in Denmark. When a bank gives a mortgage to a home buyer, it creates matching bonds that it sells to investors. The bank gets cash to extend more loans, and the owners of these covered bonds get a steady stream of payments from the people paying back the mortgage. So the people give money to the bank lends the money to the borrower makes the payment to the bank then makes payments back to the investor, the person, the initial person that invested into the bank. Okay, right? Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Okay, so it says the value of the bonds and therefore the value of the underlying mortgages rises and falls like any other asset traded in the financial market. When borrowing rates for new mortgages go up, the value of those bonds tied to older, cheaper mortgages goes down. In the eyes of investors hungry for higher returns, a loan that pays 7% interest is worth more than one that pays only 3%. This does not mean, however, that the value of the actual house has dropped, even if bond investors aren't as keen at the underlying loan. There are plenty of regular buyers who still want a house. This is super important. This is super important because this kind of leads into like what actually, how Denmark utilizes this system. The value of that loan, not the dollar value, right? $500,000 loan. It's not. We're not talking about the $500,000 loan. We're talking about like how much is that loan actually worth in the eyes of the investor who's making money on the interest rate, right? Yep. So now it says when U.S. homeowners pay off their mortgages, they have only one option, right? Pony up the amount left on the loan, right? You have a $500,000 loan. If you're going to buy another house, you're going to pay off the $500,000 loan, right? We have no other choice. You have to settle up. But when Danish homeowners pay off their mortgages, this blew my mind. When Danish homeowners pay off their mortgages, they have two choices. Pay back the balance on the home loan, same as Americans, or pay the market value, which is the amount that's covered, which is the amount their covered bonds would trade for on the open market, not the housing market, but the bond market. If interest rates go up and the value of those bonds fall below the amount remaining on the loan, it becomes cheaper for the Danes to pay off their mortgages. So what does that look like? And I think here's an example, right? So it says, let's say the face value of the mortgage or the amount of the homeowner would have to pay to get rid of it, excuse me, is $500,000, right? U.S. $500,000, you're going to have to pay off $500,000, period. You sell the house, you get it, that they have no other option. And it says, but then interest rates, you have a low rate, but say interest rates rise, say by 4 percentage points. In the U.S., this turn of events would trap many homeowners in their house, which is what's happened. They would have to pay to not only pay back the $500,000, but they'd have to get a new mortgage with a higher interest rate. In the Danish model, the same situation could work out for the homeowner's favor. That's because as general interest rates rise, the mortgage value of the covered bonds and therefore the underlying mortgage drops. So instead of paying back the entire mortgage, that $500,000, the Danish homeowners could go out and buy back matching bonds for, say, $400,000. So essentially what that means is if that mortgage, if it was at $500,000 at 3%, and now the rates are at 6%, well, the 3% loan isn't worth as much as a 6% loan. So a 6% loan, it would be worth $500,000, but maybe a 3% loan, it's worth less because the investors are making less money. So at 3%, the $500,000 loan is actually only worth to the investor $400,000. Mm-hmm. And instead of in America, it's the same thing, but in America, the investors, they keep the money, right? The Danes give it back to the homeowners. So you sell a house, it says if you sell their home for $700,000, you get to pocket the money. They get to pocket $300,000 instead of $200,000. Joe.
Yeah.
This is huge.
Yeah.
This is mind blowing. That means that every homeowner in America, if this hypothetically could happen here, if the U.S. I'm not going to say what I'm thinking because it wouldn't be appropriate. But if they like open their eyes and were able to seize, this opportunity to revamp the mortgage finance market, a homeowner would sell a house and they would be basically compensated for giving up their rate. Because if you have a house for $700 and you have a $500,000 mortgage, but you're going to get an extra $100,000.
Yep.
The reason they do that is so you can take that $100,000. Now you have $100,000 extra to put on the next house, which essentially buys down the value of that house, which makes the swap even.
Yeah.
So now you're not getting into a high mortgage rate. Yep. It's not one for your move is not this way. If you're buying the same house, apples to apples, the rate's the same, even though on paper it's a higher rate.
Yeah. And you can use that money, of course, we don't have all of the fine nitty gritty details of what they're able to do, but just based on the example that's outlined here, if you went to anybody, whether they were a potential home buyer or a potential home seller, and said, hey, if you could have an extra $100,000 in your real estate transaction, would that benefit you? I don't know anybody who would say no. And furthermore, it's really nice that you could use that potential difference in funds, that profit. Like you said, you could throw $100,000 at the down payment and therefore reduce your monthly payments. You could spend $40,000 to buy down the interest rate from 7% down to 5% or whatever, what have you. Obviously, you have to speak with a loan person to find that out. But the fact of the matter is it gives people a little bit more power to control their destiny a little bit, and it incentivizes them to much more seriously consider making a move, even though the interest rate's not quite as agreeable. And that's the entire point of the Danish model. So that by essentially the Danish government and the Danish people are looking at mortgages as sort of a standalone product that the owner also owns. So the owner owns the house and the owner also has a mortgage, and they're decoupling those things because here in America, they're basically one and the same. You have a house, you have a mortgage. When you sell the house, you pay off the mortgage. It is what it is, and that's it. There's really no ways to go about it. So the Danish model of sort of making the mortgage another asset, another tool.
I didn't think about it that way. Yeah, right. And and the thing is, and we're gonna, I have some more information on this as well, but because of this, like there is no lock-in effect over there.
Right.
There is no lock-in effect. You have people that are moving freely when financially it makes sense for them to do so.
Yeah.
And yes, they have inventory challenges and all the things. There are some things that transcend countries, but they're not dealing with this because, the reality of it is that this lock-in effect that we've been talking about, there's no answer, Joe.
No.
People are going to have to either they eventually suck it up.
Yep.
Because rates will never go down to where they were.
No.
They will never
They shouldn't have been down there in the first place if you ask me.
They should not have. They should not have, but and that's one of the reasons. The rates. There's all kinds of speculation why why values are what they are. But the question I would say is, if this were hypothetically possible in the U.S., our inventory would increase, right?
Oh, of course, without
if
a doubt.
The inventory increases, then I think it's safe to assume that buyer demand would be more satisfied. Now we have a ton, like the number of millennials coming into the market now, right? Bigger than, there are more millennials than the boomers and the Gen Xers combined that are coming in as first-time home buyers. And when a Gen Xer sells, well, in my generation, when they sell, it's a neutral effect on on the housing market, right? Where you're selling and you're buying, it's one for one. I'm giving to the market and I'm taking from the market. The boomers, because they're not going into retirement homes. They're not retirement like assisted living, like they're living longer and all
living
the things.
In their
they might
homes
be
much longer than ever before.
Much longer. So they may give up the family home they raise their kids in, but they're still buying another house. So it's a neutral. The millennials are coming in. A lot of the newer millennials and the older side millennials, they may be in the position, they bought a bit ago and now they're maybe looking to move up. But I'm talking the newer millennials. They're just taking from the market. So there's always going to be, as those millennials come in, there's going to be continued demand, right? I don't see a situation where demand completely swings 100%. But if you all of a sudden have more inventory, more available inventory, it's going to soften. And when demand softens, prices will reflect that. You won't have these crazy, ridiculous escalated prices because you won't have 10 buyers competing for one house.
Exactly. And that's what people, they talk about. Well, to your first point, it absolutely will free up inventory because, as we know, based on a Harvard economist who, no offense, Jen, probably knows more than you and I combined times 10
no joke.
On this subject.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
If he goes, there's 1 million homes that we have identified, 1 million owners that are suffering, quote unquote, from this lock-in effect.
Yep.
Out of the 5 million that should be transferred, 20%. I mean, imagine, Jen, if overnight your market had a 20% increase in inventory, would that make a difference?
A little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Absolutely, it would. Right?
Even the little bit that we've had, even the little bit that we've had. I mean, we're still dramatic. I mean, to give it some perspective, Plymouth is town I'm in is huge. It's 102 square miles. And, largest town in Massachusetts, by far, lots of open space, but still our inventory, a general inventory just for our town is about 350 homes is healthy. It's a healthy market, right?
Yeah.
Between 300, 350. Pandemic, I mean, at one point in the low time, there were like 20 homes. Last year we went up to 50. I think now we're sitting at about 75. So significant difference, right? Yeah. But still, 20%, we would have to be 100% improvement, to get any kind of traction at this point.
Yeah.
To make a marked difference. I mean, 15, 10%, 20%, you're talking an additional 14 homes. It's not gonna make it make a huge difference. Like we've seen it go, instead of 20 offers is 10 offers. You know what I mean?
Right.
But no joke. This stuff is great, and there's more to it, right? There's absolutely more to it, in the sense that, it's not all super easy, straightforward, all the stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, well, why don't we just do it? Well, there are ways that they do it and whatnot. It says, it went on to say this lucky Danish homeowner may have to turn around and buy another home at a higher rate, sure, but the profit from paying back their loan at its market rate gives them a buffer to do so. Danes don't even have to sell their house to unlock the savings.
Yeah.
They can choose to refinance. I don't know why, maybe you bought it at a higher rate and you want to, rates go down in the future. In that case, they would have to borrow only $400 instead of $500, pay off the original loan. Which is very interesting, which is really interesting.
That's a huge consumer. I mean, for the consumer, that's huge. I mean, It just to think about all of a sudden, rates went up. My loan is less desirable to investors. Therefore, it has less monetary value because it's less desirable. And now I only have to pay off that new lower value because it's less desirable.
Yep.
I mean, that's not the way that we work here in the United States, which is
unfortunate.
That's what you agreed to pay back. You got to pay it back regardless.
Well, and because, and I'll tell you why it's not going to work. It's because the mortgage-backed securities in the bond market, Wall Street, they'll never give up that money.
No, that's why
They'll never give up that money. They will never, even though it will benefit the housing market, which will benefit the entire U.S. economy.
correct, because housing is 25% of the US GDP. I mean, just real estate alone. So yes, when the real estate market does good, the American economy does
Well,
good.
and here's the thing, the people lose. I think it's much bigger than people realize, in the sense that when somebody buys a house, right? They have repairs, so they go into Home Depot. They got to do the lawn stuff, so they go into Home Depot, Lowe's. Oh, there's a plumbing repair, plumbing contractor. Oh, they're going to do updates, general contractor. Oh, there's an electrical issue, electrical contractor. Like,
Yeah.
a homeowner keeps all of this stuff, funnels money into the economy just by owning the home. So it's like all of these offshoots that people don't realize, that, everybody suffers when the housing market suffers. Everybody, right? And it's so if the Wall Street would get their head out of their what, like it's a big picture. You know what I'm saying? But that would be up to the federal regulators to make those changes.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. You're 100% correct.
It goes on to say that another difference would be that they're assumable. I talked about that last week about assumable mortgages. Assumable mortgages have been around since, a long time. Long time, 70s, so, but they're limited to FHA, VA, USDA, whereas in Denmark, they're all assumable, which is crazy.
That's an interesting thing. To just make loans by default assumable is interesting. Now, obviously, that does usually require that new buyer, that borrower, to have the difference in money between the value. At least here, it does.
Right.
Which is why assumable loans here in the United States, while we have them, they're not super realistic because housing is so expensive. You now, as a home buyer, you have to come in with hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Or take a second mortgage. Or take a gap mortgage, which exists, right? So you do assumable loan, but you take a gap mortgage for the difference.
For the difference, right?
Yep. Right. I mean, that's what you'd have to do.
To see in the Danish world that they're just like, they're all assumable, and that. So
I bet you
it's just about giving the consumer, whether that's the seller or the buyer in this situation, because most sellers flip around and become buyers. But in the Danish model, clearly they have valued the consumer, and they're doing a much better job of protecting the consumer by offering different ways to mitigate mortgage rate increases that we just don't have here.
Yeah, but they're still making money, which we're gonna see this in a second. I won't get too in detail about it, but it's not like, they're doing it out of the goodness. No, but this is a business.
Yep.
No government does things out of the good of their heart. You know what I mean? Like, it's all about them. It's about money and protection, and make sure that it's more fair.
Yeah.
The article goes on to say that while the Danish system may seem complex, it's not totally absurd to think about. We could adopt something similar here. However, it would take a lot of work. Overhauls for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, a massive education campaign for consumers, and maybe even an act of Congress. It's not as if you can just wave a wand and grant homeowners permission to start paying back their mortgages at market value. The existing contracts explicitly lay out the repayment terms, and the mortgage bonds are bundled together in a way that makes it impossible to pluck one out of the pool as they do in Denmark. I mean, they would have to, in order to roll that out here in the U.S., it would have to be like any mortgages written after a certain date. Like they wouldn't be able to do it. It wouldn't apply to earlier mortgages because the repayment terms, everything about them would have to be rewritten, right?
Yep.
But not impossible. I mean, during the financial crisis, right? The U.S. did roll out some major adjustments. Major programs. They rolled out the Home Affordable Plan, right? They completely revamped the TRID, which is the whole disclosure process at a closing. it is possible. It is possible for them to do it, but it would have to get a lot. You'd have to get a lot of politicians on the same page, and we see where our country is at right now. But that's another story for another day. It says anything that gives consumers protection from rising interest rates would come at a cost. Banks would demand borrowers to pay higher interest rates from the start of their loans. The former director of the Danish Financial Supervisory Authority, if I can say that word, Supervisory Authority told me Danish mortgage rules are stricter in other ways that favor the lender. So it's not a catch to it. It's just like, okay, well, if you're going to give me this, then what is going to balance the scales?
It's a pro and con. Like it's a double-edged sword. There's always an up, there's always a down. And you're about to read what the major downfall, well, not downfall, but the major.
It's just different.
Yeah, the major different. In what we have to do.
And it says borrowers are required to put 20% down on the home's price, and foreclosures are speedy. Imagine that. Thanks to a more creditor-friendly legal system. I will tell you, Joe, I worked with banks, for several years. This is going back pre-COVID. I worked with representing banks. So the foreclosure process happens, the auction, and nobody buys it at the auction, so the bank takes over the property as the owner, and then they call me, right, to pick up, to basically manage the property, babysit the property, eventually get it on the market and sell it. And I'm telling you, some of these properties that I would be handed, they were sitting in somebody's desk drawer for 6 months. I mean, I'd walk into some of these houses and they're full of mold and gross because they've been vacant for months and months and months because the foreclosure process is so stinking slow. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the stories on your end, people being like, "Oh yeah, they started the foreclosure process, but that was like a year ago."
Yep.
And they haven't paid they haven't paid their mortgage in a year.
It's routinely 9-12 months before there's any type of I was in notice of default. First off, they told me that I missed a payment. Then I just got notice that I'm in default. Now they're starting the foreclosure process. Okay, and now the foreclosure process is about to formally begin. But before it begins, they're giving me an opportunity to settle. It's always something. Then finally, it's like, wow, it actually got to foreclosure. Like that's almost like a rarity because it takes so long to get there. And it's interesting, imagine now home buyers, if in our climate, in the United States real estate climate as it is, all of a sudden we changed, we said, hey, good news, we're going to implement these effects. Let's just say hypothetically. Yeah. Enough politicians are on board, Fannie and Freddie are on board and they say, okay, we're going to rewrite some stuff. We are going to enact some change to help mitigate the lock-in effect because the U.S. housing market is still too frozen.
It's just broken. It's officially broken. I really firmly believe, Joe, that there's a lot of things that are broken, but I think that this is proof positive that, the housing industry, I mean, it started with, real estate agents, and I don't want to get into that conversation, but the reality of it is there's changes needed to be made because things have been trotting along the way they were in the real estate agent field in relation to consumers and commissions for 100 years, unchanged, right? So change needed to happen, but it's just like, how long did it take for that to change? And it's like, it's still not right. It's still not right in terms of where they're at with that. But that system is not, it's broken. And the mortgage, this is very clear. The fact that we're in this situation with no, the only way, if they don't do, this is the only thing that I've seen, aside from building more, creating more inventory, building homes.
That's the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing.
Absolutely, because there's only so much land.
Yeah, and right. It takes the longest time. It takes the most money. It's a lot.
It's a lot. You can't force people to sell their houses. Right. So, and if somebody's sitting at a 2.75%, I mean, if somebody came along and asked me, Jen, I want to buy your house. Well, I'm telling you, if they're going to buy it's going to be a ridiculously high number. Yep. Because I'm not giving up my rate. I'm not
Yep.
giving. I'm. It's affordable. It's comfortable. All I can make the whatever. Like, and I'm of one of millions of people that are in that boat. So it's like you're not going to force people to sell. You're not going to be able to incentivize anybody by a reduced commission
No.
to the real estate agent. That's not going to incentivize somebody to give up their low rate.
No.
So it's like two choices. You got to create housing, and the only way to create housing is to build it. This is the only thing that I've seen that's not creating housing that could potentially get us out of this hole. There was something I want to pull up here actually that I wanted to show you because the significance of why it's important that we get people to move and open up. Here it is. I'm just going to show this to you real quick because I just saw this. I found another article that was super interesting. There's not a lot. This is just an article that, who is this person that wrote it? He's a strategist and a consultant, real estate and macroeconomics. Real estate, I get. Macroeconomics, not so much. Why Denmark's housing market works better than ours. And he repeats a lot of stuff that we've already talked about. But down here, he says, mortgage lock-in also has less obvious but more harmful, widespread, and long-lived effects. And this is what I'm talking about and concerned about. It says, not least it exuberates, and this is a macroeconomics guy talking, so it's a lot of $10 words, right? Exuberates. Who uses exuberates? But anyways, I digress. Not at least it exuberates declining levels of geographic mobility. Americans are staying in their homes longer. They are evincing a declining willingness to move neighborhoods, cities, or states in order to find work that better matches their skills. By giving Americans a powerful, and this is so important. I'm just gonna get this up here. Here we go. It says, by giving Americans a powerful incentive not to move, mortgage lock-in contributes to a handful of modern-day macroeconomic problems, including anemic productivity growth and neo-feudal levels of income inequality. I will tell you, I had to look that up on ChatGPT. Because I'm like, what the heck is neo-feudal? So for the benefit of everybody watching, I pulled it up and I have a copy of that.
Good.
I know, I did some homework. So, all right, neo-feudal levels of income inequality. What the heck does that mean? It refers to a modern-day economic situation where the disparity between the wealthy and the poor is so extreme that it resembles the feudal system of the Middle Ages. In a feudal society, think about it. You think about that for a second, Joe. The people that are moving now are upper class, the people with cash.
Yep.
The people that are the gap between the has and the has not, the people that have the money and the people that don't.
Yep.
This is creating a huge gap.
And
huge gap.
It's interesting that it's kind of been brought back, this sort of this feudalism concept, because back in the days of feudalism in the Middle Ages, it was your landowners and everyone else. Like that.
Yep.
That was how you were classified, and there were some other classifications in there, nobility and serfs and all those things. But moral of the story, at the end of the day, if you owned land, you had more privileges, you had more power, you certainly had more economic advances and gain. And it's interesting that it's kind of going back to that where, there's so many people that feel like, man, I'm not going to be able to own a house. It's very difficult to own a house. And I feel like I'm not going to have the same opportunity. I mean, we all know that people that own real estate are 40 times more wealthy than those who do not. And that's just that. That's not, it is what it is. And it's not a good thing. We know that for a while, the income inequality in the nation, the middle classes continues to just get squeezed, and it continues to be divided further into the upper and the lower, and the middle is going away. So it's just kind of interesting that this is brought up, because it's really starting to resemble that difference between the landowners and the non-landowners, and it's almost like it's coming full circle, unfortunately.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. The rest of what does it say? It says in feudal society there was a stark, like you were just talking about, there's a stark division between the wealthy nobility and the poor serfs or peasants with little opportunity of upward mobility, aka the unaffordable housing market. In contemporary terms, neo-feudal implies that a small wealthy elite holds a disproportionate amount of power and wealth, while the majority of the population has limited economic opportunities and struggles with low income and poor living conditions. This term is often used to criticize modern economic systems where wealth and resources are heavily concentrated among a small segment of population, leading to a significant social and economic inequalities. That's this article. That's
it's like scarily relevant and true.
It's
it's
super,
like when you speak to reading,
super.
you're like, oh no, like this is not good.
This
And it's
doesn't
true
feel
because
good.
if you
This
if
doesn't
you
feel
if,
good.
if you own a home now, and especially if you own that home prior to the pandemic, um, your ability to afford another home, regardless of interest rates, like just table that for a moment, is so much higher because you have the ability of earning equity in the property. And so you can take that equity, and if the market goes up 20%, well, you've got equity in a house that's gone up 20%. That's going to aid you in buying the next house. And although that home is more expensive, the home you're selling is more valuable. And if you don't have a home to sell at all and you don't get that equity increase, well, then that means the home you're trying to buy has just gone up in 20% in value and you have nothing helping you out. So it certainly is becoming a case where if you have a home, it's easier to buy one. And if you don't have a home, it's harder to buy one.
Yeah, you got to remember, it's like, you have, the huge jump that a typical homeowner has to make to buy the same home. I think a couple weeks back,
Yep,
I've done live streams about that, about the fact that it was like this disproportionate large percentage of U.S. homeowners could never afford to buy their own home.
They couldn't
afford it at the new interest rates.
The
right?
home that I am sitting in right now, if I had to buy it today at its market value, at the current interest rate, there'd be no way. I probably wouldn't be able to afford my home if I purchased it today at the same price as I did when I bought it a few years ago, even at the same interest rate. So even if the price has that, okay, my home is worth more today than it was 3 years ago, even if I had the same interest rate, I still probably wouldn't be able to afford to buy it today because it's more expensive.
Maybe because if the U.S. had the Danish model, say your house is worth, and I know you're in Southern California, so these numbers are kind of laughable, but we'll just humor me. Say it's 500,000.
Sure.
So Southern California, the median price is what, like 60 million or something like that.
So in LA, they just came out that the median home price in Los Angeles is now $900,000.
Oh, that's gross. That's
It
gross. That's all where the Hollywood types live anyways. It's just ridiculous. Over here on the East Coast, east, upper, northeast, we're okay, but give me a break. But anyways, it's kind of laughable. But just say for hypothetical, like your house is worth 500,000, right? And you're like, I want to adopt 12 kids. I need a bigger house.
Yep.
God help you if you do that, but that's beside the point. So it's like you have that 500,000, you want to jump up to 800. Well, under the Danish model, you have a low interest rate. You have now, say the rate is at 3%, and you want to jump to 6%, right? Now you're going to get the benefit of the mortgage market not only giving you that equity back, but then give additional money. So yes, the interest rate on the new house is going to be lower, but you've got a buffer, and it brings it down. Does it bring it down? Does it help with the mortgage? Here's the thing: is the prices are high, but when you're selling, you sell how you buy high, right? Yep. Like it's a more like if you sell low, you buy low. Like it's one for one. If you're in a home, what you buy next, it kind of is irrelevant because the market it runs in sync. Do you know what I mean? But if for really the ones coming in the market that aren't selling anything, those are the ones that are just they're in an impossible situation. But it would just open so many it would just open so many doors.
It just softens the blow. Like I said, it allows you to allocate that money to buy down the rate, and maybe it does negate some of that higher interest rate. It allows you to put down a bigger down payment, or maybe you say, screw it. So in the model that we use, the Danish model, in that example, the difference is $100,000. So instead of making 200,000, you get to make 300,000, 2 on the house and 100 on the loan.
Yep.
So you might say, hey, screw it. You know what? I'm fine with paying a higher price and a higher rate. But now I have $100,000 on as a buffer, as a cushion, and maybe I don't need to buy the rate down, and I am okay with just paying the higher mortgage rate because maybe my income has gotten better or what have you. But either way, now you have $100,000 extra in the bank to at least fall back on in case of emergency. So either way, what that Danish system does is it just provides a lot of different options to the home buyer and seller to alleviate some of the pain of that lock-in effect.
100%, 110%, absolutely. This article kind of goes on to say, like, let's see, but this didn't need to be an intractable problem. The only other country in the world that finances mortgages with bonds, Denmark, is a model, yada, yada. It says, in the U.S., banks originate mortgages, then sell them onward to GSEs, which I looked that up. That was, government-sponsored enterprise. It's another way of saying that it's, FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, for bundling their mortgages. Danish mortgage finance operates on a balanced principle. The bank lending is funded by the issuing bonds, which is precisely match the cash flow of the underlying mortgages. Danish banks retain ownership of the mortgages, which here they do not, including their credit risk. So that's the other thing. It's like they assume the mortgages, but they also assume the credit risk. So they're going to be more picky on who they bring in, because they're going to have to hold that note. They're going to have to hold it. Which is why
this model requires 20% down, because 100%. It's risky. So there's, again, one thing that maybe is one of the marked differences between our model and the Danish model is you can buy a house with, if you do a VA, 0% down, but FHA 3.5%, 5%, 10%, 15, 20, whatever.
Yeah, no money down.
20% bust.
No money down. Our loans are starting to make a comeback as well.
Yeah,
which is kind of scary. I don't like those.
Nope.
It's now you have no buffer.
No equity buffer. If the market goes down 2%, you're underwater.
Yeah, it's just too scary. I want to bring this up just because it has to do with the inventory situation. It says, with the buyback option available, the Danes have no reason not to sell their homes amidst rising interest rates. This is clear from the supply data. The number of homes listed for sale in Denmark has declined, but by less than it has in the United States. So there is a dip, right? There's a dip. I mean, you got good old COVID right here. So of course it's gonna dip because there's that shot that was heard around the world. But what a difference, right? What a huge difference.
Huge.
It says, and because banks retain a skin in the game, to your point, underwriting standards are tighter, and banks are incentivized to act in ways that enhance the credit of the borrower. For example, by suggesting they refinance. Can you imagine? Opportunistically amidst falling rates, or by buying back their bonds, trading below par when rates rise. I mean,
could you imagine a bank calling you up and saying, we're really urging you to refinance because you're going to have to
it's going to benefit you. It's going to benefit you, no, that's never going to happen.
That's wild.
So why hasn't happened? This is the part that I wanted to know. I'm like, why? And a lot of this stuff, again, above my macroeconomics depth of knowledge. But the bottom line is like, even before the 2008 financial crisis, academics, and this is what's interesting, Joe. Even before 2008 financial crisis, academics in the U.S. have been pointing out the merits of the Danish mortgage system and the benefits the U.S. would reap by adopting some of their design principles. This is not new.
Nope.
They know about it. They know about it. Okay? It says the current suboptimal American setup seems to be due to a path dependency and vested interests, but also
You don't
legitimate.
say vested interests, huh? You don't say.
Yep, and also legitimate technical challenges. Former Fed Chairman Bernanke outlined 4 challenges. First, the FHLBs, which is the Fannie Mae's, the Freddie Macs, and so forth, can tap capital markets at low rates and advance these funds to originating banks, covered bonds, non-economical, i.e., they can make more money. Second, there has been a degree of crowding. I don't quite this is again over my pay grade, but the GSE's implicit government backing and their scale of securitization operations have made it difficult for banks to use covered bonds to finance their own prime mortgage because there's no weight to it.
Yeah.
There's one is not weighted necessarily over the other as much as it is in the Danish system. Third, American regulation is not yet sufficiently protective of covered bondholders. And fourth, banks have de-incentivized to issue covered bonds, which are the bonds that provide the capital to the banks, because capital requirements for these are higher compared to securitization via the GSEs, the Fannie Mae's, the Freddie Macs. None of these changes are insurmountable, Joe. 7% mortgage rates represent an opportunity to rethink the way we finance in America. A small Scandinavian country is showing us a path forward. And the U.S. will never pay attention.
It's interesting too, because a lot of times, obviously this is a completely different topic that we're not going to get into, but when people talk about the healthcare system and healthcare in the Scandinavian countries and in European countries, why can't we do that in the United States? And Scandinavian countries and European countries do it this way, why can't we do it? And a lot of times, the argument is, we're just a much larger nation with much more people. And that is a valid excuse. We can't run, it's like running you can't run a small business of 4 employees the same way as a business of 400. But here's a great example of something that a small country is doing that really isn't dependent upon the size or the ability of that nation. I mean, this is basically, we're talking about policy changes. And
that's all we're talking.
And at the bottom of that last article, all of those reasons on why it's difficult are just, because it would be hard. You know what? It is a lot, but it's not, like the article said, it's not insurmountable. We've known this for a long time. And like the first article we read, we chose to not fix the roof on a sunny day, and now it's raining, and that's the position we're in. We knew about this before the great economic crisis, and the United States has basically sat on their hands, and now it's at a point where it's like, man, what would be nice is if we had this Danish system. And here we are, regretting that we didn't do anything.
It's very sad, and I know that this gets overused with people like darn government system, pitchforks. Right. It's not that way at all. It's just it is sad that we have so much potential. We have so much. I sound like a one of those health gurus. So much untapped potential. The U.S. has so much untapped potential.
Yeah.
And our policymakers that we have voted in are not utilizing that whatsoever. It's all about, trying to make somebody happy, and the smaller, I feel like it's like the low-hanging fruit on a lot of this stuff. And what's going to make people happy. And sometimes you need to do the path less traveled for the benefit of the many. And it's like, are people, if you had to, let's be honest, something like this, if all of a sudden you said, okay, we're going to do this system, and by the way, 3% mortgages, 3% down payments, 5% down payments, 10% down payments are gone.
Yep.
Those millennials are gonna, I don't know how that would work.
That's a great point.
I don't know how that would work, because now you have escalated prices with an even bigger barrier in front of them. So I don't know, like it's easy to say on paper, oh yeah, we'll just institute the system, but like how do you do that? I don't know how that happens. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Where you don't alienate an entire generation of home buyers.
yeah. And that's a good point because most millennials can't even fathom putting 20% down for a home. And I don't
No,
blame them, especially when the median US price is now approaching $500,000. I believe last time I checked it was in high fours, something 460 something or something is the median price or something like that.
yep,
So I mean, most people can't fathom having to drum up almost $90,000.
no,
And I don't
I know.
blame
I
them. That's
think
a lot of money.
it is it's a ton of money, and I feel like something like this, it's like it's breaking your leg on a bad you break your leg, it heals incorrectly, so you have to break, rough idea,
Right.
but break your leg again
Right.
so it can heal properly, and that's what would need to happen,
Yeah.
which would mean that a lot of people would hit the pause button and it would hurt for a while. But
Yeah.
when the market caught up, because the buyers that can buy, those people that maybe do have the down payment, because there are a lot of buyers that are coming in that do have the cash.
Yes,
They've
yes,
been
there are. I
renting
work
for
with
a
them.
while.
I work,
There's
especially
a
being here in Los Angeles. I mean, you'd be
they are,
surprised.
and first time home buyers, with 20% down.
Yep.
There are a lot of
Working with one right now.
young
I'm working with one right
bum-
now.
Yeah, so it's like though they do exist. So it's like those buyers would need to get in, and the market would open up, which would mean more inventory would come on the market, and then slowly prices would settle, because the more buyers would come in, and the more prices settle down, more buyers would come in, buyers come in, and then eventually it'll get to a point where the income levels, enough time would have to go by, those income levels would rise enough to make it so that now first-time home buyers can get their foot in the door. But how long is that going to take? And you've got so many other moving parts with rentals and rental just the investors, and these big investment corporations that are just raking people over the coals for rents and all those things that are happening in the background. It's a mess.
Yeah, it is.
Have you seen that video game Fallout? Have you seen that?
I'm
that
familiar
video?
with it, but I haven't
Yeah.
seen.
So I'm
the
not a video game player. I don't play a lot of video games, but I like sci-fi type stuff. And Amazon Prime came out with the Fallout series. For those who love sci-fi, it's a great, absolutely phenomenal show. But the whole premise is that boom, nuclear bomb, which was, spoiler alert, actually set off by the U.S. government to basically, and they have all these fallout shelters everywhere. But the people that can afford to be in the fallout shelters and then kill everybody else and start over.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we don't want to necessarily do that, but it's almost like, how well, we need to start over somehow.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting. That was a bad analogy, and I apologize. I'm not suggesting.
I know what you mean.
I don't know where my brain was going. I was looking for an analogy, and that popped in, and sometimes the stream of consciousness. So I apologize if I turned anybody sideways on that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how you fix something like this without completely upsetting the apple cart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and that's why I tell people that I tell a lot of clients, it's a really complex, complicated problem. And, a lot of people are like, oh, well, if the Fed would just lower interest rates, the Fed and Jerome and Jerome Powell and the Fed, and you're like, well, you have to understand, like, this guy is trying to walk a tightrope because consumers also don't want high inflation. They don't want their money to not go as far. And if interest rates go down, that's more likely to happen. So it's this teetering tightrope walk that's very difficult. And it's a very complex, difficult problem. And a lot of people don't truly understand all of the different ingredients that go into making that problem and therefore how they can be solved. So it's very, very difficult, which kind of makes your point make sense, where it's like, at some point we just kind of have to start with a fresh slate and just wipe the system and
Something.
come back and say, okay, how do we pick back up so that this is actually sustainable? And obviously there's not a possibility of that happening.
Well, because, zombie apocalypse would make that happen too.
It's true.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
That would happen. I'm watching The Walking Dead now. So there you go for the second time. And that talk about resetting an entire government. But that's a whole nother situation that didn't end up well. So we don't want that. We don't want that. So I got some housekeeping items here. The first thing I just was, so anyone watching the stream, if you have any questions, if you want to send me a private message, if you want, to question about, and, curious about any of this stuff, or if you need to talk to somebody in your local area, about the value of your home to kind of see where you're at, check out on my website, jensylvester.com. Just click this referral link right here, request an agent referral, fill that out. I'll get right back to you. And then get you connected to a good agent. I've been in this biz for 28 years, so I kind of know a few people. And I know the good people, like, in other words, the people that know what they're talking about. And one of those people I'm going to say he's sitting right in front of me because really he's on the other side of the country for sure, is this guy. So down in SoCal, is that what they call it? SoCal. Down in California. What's the temperature there today?
Today it's nice, actually. Today it's 74 and it's mostly sunny, a little bit of marine layer. But it's beautiful, and we're going to probably be in the mid 80s this week, between mid 70s and mid 80s.
What does that mean, marine layer? What does that mean?
So that's basically like it's high fog, it's high level fog. So
okay.
we get typically in May and June we have May gray and June gloom. So in May and June we'll have some fog that rolls in from the coast, and then it will kind of hang around because it's not quite hot enough to burn off real quick. So like right now, like in the afternoon, like it kind of looks like there's fog high in the sky. But it's still pretty sunny, and it's usually like 75 to 80 degrees. So marine layer is that sort of like high level fog that it's not quite beautiful blue sky sunny, but it's still warm.
Oh, must be nice.
It is nice.
Must be nice.
It is nice.
It's nice if you want to.
One of the joys of living in this wonderful place.
Well, you know what?
Weather.
If you're going to pay those crazy West Coast prices, then at least you get that to show for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. one of the beautiful things.
And then I have just a shameless plug, which I got to do for my my compadre Jackie Baker. So if anyone watching this live stream is interested in a few chuckles, Jackie and I do a podcast every week, and we film it, throw it up on the tubes if you like that type of content, or you can catch it on all the podcast channels. And basically she researches all the craziest, ridiculous stories that you can't even fathom, and then she reads them to me. And then we discuss, and we have some laughs, and but it's some good content. We have some, we try educational component in there to try to teach people about these, what may happen. But check it out if that's your thing,
Yeah, great series. It's very entertaining.
You listen to it?
Yeah, I've listened to some.
Yeah, cool. It's fun. That's like the highlight of my week. That podcast, legitimately, we started. It's pure just fun for Jackie and I. We have no expectations of like there's no expected outcome of it is what it is. Like we do it for us.
Yeah,
and
great.
yeah, and you know what? People just getting some good feedback, and people enjoy it and all that kind of stuff. And quite honestly, you know what? If I can get a couple people to smile, chuckle, whatever, get something out of it, then that's great.
There you go.
So it is what it is. But you got anything else to add there, Joe?
I think we covered it. I think we
we did. And this is is this something that necessarily is going to help somebody buy a house tomorrow? No. But I just feel like it was too interesting of a topic to pass up. Like, what I mean? Like, I feel like
it's good information.
Very interesting.
It's good for people to know and be educated This is how change is enacted by people talking about it. So
100%. Because I mean, it's like, you think about why things are the way they are. You get your world a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And you realize, to know that the U.S. is different. Like, a lot of the countries out there, they'll have locked rate mortgage, like our friends to the north, right? In Canada,
yeah,
you have a locked rate mortgage for maybe 10 years.
maybe, yeah.
And then it floats with the mortgage market. So you get that 3% interest rate. Well, if you're not moving within 10 years, guess what? Now your rate's going to go up with the market. And that's normal for many countries around the world. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
And we're kind of spoiled here,
Yeah. Yep,
So,
I agree.
And then I guess that's the message, and that's the takeaway, like the glass half full. I think, to say, you know what, yeah, it's hard right now. For the home sellers out there, it's hard and not anything but ideal. But to live in this country, to have that opportunity to lock in for 30 years, if you have that rate, is we're fortunate that way.
Yep.
We're very fortunate. So, anyhow, thanks, Joe, for joining me on this conversation. And let's see what we got going on here. So we'll get a little dance music, sign off music. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a great week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Be kind to your neighbors. Be kind to everyone that you come across with. Do something unexpected, extra, and have a great, happy week no matter where you are in the country. Get some sun, and we'll see you next week. Ciao.
Bye.
Well, dance it up, Joe. Yeehaw.